So this is going to be another one of those episodes without a main topic, which I think we've been doing quite well with lately. That way we don't have to think up too much in advance and plan and do research.
That's what happens when you've got the both of us who are very busy lately.
Exactly. But we found a bunch of interesting articles with topics that are, I would say, really good for sparking discussion. I want to start with a simple one. I mentioned a couple times about the Ricoh GR IV Monochrome camera, which is coming out. So it will be the most affordable monochrome camera, so black and white, doesn't shoot color. And there was an article in, what was it, Petapixel, that points out that it is expensive because the sensor is hard to source. And it's true, I never thought about that before, because with the Leica Q monochrome, it's already an expensive camera. The monochrome isn't that much more expensive than the color model. But for the Ricoh, since it's such a lower price, the difference in price seems larger in percentage from over the color. But it's true that not many companies make monochrome sensors. In particular, the Ricoh is an APS-C sensor, whereas the Leica is a full-frame sensor.
Well, and also, I mean, you figure, and I should probably know this off the top of my head because I talk about photography, but I don't. But a lot of the sensors in most of the other cameras on the market, they're sourced from, like, Sony makes a lot of them. I think maybe Canon makes their own. But basically, you have big fabrications of sensors that they chop up, and they can basically make them in huge, big, bulky amounts. In this case, there's not a huge demand for, 5 different companies who are using the same monochrome sensor. So this totally makes sense. What is the price on it?
I think it's $21.99 in the States.
Okay.
But it's something like $15 or $16.99 here. Part of that is tariff in the States.
Yeah.
Although I don't know what tariffs there are anymore because it changes every day with the guy in the driver's seat there changing his mind and not remembering which tariff he's applied to which country.
Yeah.
We won't go there. I just found it interesting that Ricoh felt that they had to point this out to explain the difference in price. And I think it's good for people to realize that you're not getting less with a monochrome sensor. You're getting different. It's not like it should be cheaper because it doesn't have the color. It's actually,
Right.
It should be more expensive because it doesn't have the color stuff over the sensor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's all like matters of scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see when this camera comes out, if it is extremely popular on social media, because the GR4 is very popular for street photography, and bringing a monochrome camera into the mix where a lot of people are already converting to black and white or shooting in camera in black and white. I find that it'll be interesting to see if these sorts of people move into the black and white space, like, the space where I've been in photography for a long time. I'll put a link in the show notes to the GR4 Monochrome webpage on the Ricoh website. What I find really interesting is that a lot of the photos that they're showing as examples are extremely grainy, low light, Japanese style photos. Now, if you know, the best known photographer in Japan is Daido Moriyama, who has this very high contrast, high grain, lots of movement type style. And a lot of the photos that they're showing match that. And it suggests that this is more for the Japanese market than the Western market because of it. Now, not all the photographers on this page are Japanese. There are a couple that, here's one that looks Scandinavian. So there's a picture of a road going between a bunch of trees. But they are highlighting a lot of this Japanese style street photography. And I kind of wonder if it's going to be the kind of camera like we're seeing the Fuji X1/2 being really popular in Japan and not so popular elsewhere. If they're going to have the same thing with the Ricoh GR4 Monochrome, if it's going to be really popular in Japan and maybe not so much outside of the country.
It very well could be. I mean, it's interesting that Japan has been this little laboratory for small run innovative types of cameras. Like, it's where companies, I think, have the freedom to experiment and say, all right, well, what if we do this? And if they can produce them at a scale that meets that market, and there's enough of a demand for it, then maybe it can expand out beyond that.
Yeah. I want to go to another article, and this is me reading Apple News and finding these interesting articles that are worth talking about. Petapixel, and when I sent you this or another one, you said that Petapixel's doing really good work these days, and I think they are, particularly since DP Reviewed stumbled and they lost Chris and Jordan, but also I think a couple of other writers. They have an interesting article that says, every camera brand agrees generative AI doesn't belong in photography. What struck me is there's a controversy in the gaming world. NVIDIA has this thing called DLSS, which is this upscaling technology. And they just announced version 5 of DLSS. And in gaming websites, you're seeing before and after that it's not just upscaling, but it's AI-ifying characters, like it's smoothing them. It's taking dark skin and making it lighter. It's making eyes a different shape. It's not just an upscaling technology, which you may have in like a DVD player or a Blu-ray player, right? It is changing the image drastically. And a lot of people are complaining about this. We don't need this. We don't need this in photography. We don't need this in anything else. You can do this afterwards. We have talked about the possibility of doing a zoom in a camera using AI, but this isn't generative AI. It's not the same thing. What the DLSS 5 thing is generative AI recreating images.
Yeah, some of the examples I've seen have looked really good in that what they're trying to do is give characters like a more realistic appearance. The problem is, and some of them, like the hair looks a little bit better, the skin looks a little bit better, but in a lot of them, it really doesn't. And I think what a lot of people are going up against here is not just that it looks different, and I really love this. It's that people are respecting the artist's intent.
Yeah.
Like if the artists had wanted this character to look more realistic, then they probably would have. And it's taking away a lot of the distinctive style of some of the characters, a lot of the that flavor that you're going to go to, not just because this game has good mechanics and good playability and all that, but you want to be in the world that looks like this because this is what the creators intended. And so in the same way, bringing this back to photography, you want to be able to know that when you take a picture, you're going to capture what you see. And it's not going to be drastically different. I think what a lot of the camera companies are pushing up against is that sense of, do we do something in camera that is going to fill in some gaps? Like Samsung has really pioneered a lot of AI stuff with their Galaxy phones. And I'm sure we talked about this on the podcast where I was trying it out. You can zoom into 100x and it will basically recreate the image using AI. And in some cases, it's not bad, but it's not the image, right? It's been augmented in such a way that it's been rebuilt.
Augmented is a good word because that's what it is. It's not, in that case, it's not generative fill like we talked about a while back. It's taking the image and refining it. I remember one of your examples was pictures of people on a boat, and they were a lot smoother, but the faces were blurred because, well, the AI couldn't figure out what the faces looked like. And even if it could, that would kind of be a violation of privacy in some ways.
Yeah. I would like to think that as photographers, we want to capture what's out there.
We want the truth.
We want the truth. As we talked about in the last episode, there are ways you can go and you can generate something from scratch and, make something that doesn't exist because that is your intent to do that. And it will be photorealistic and, it may fool some people, whatever. I like to think that if you are picking up a camera, you're doing it because you want to capture what's in front of you. Otherwise, why do you even have a camera? Why are you out walking, downtown Seattle, or you're out, getting a landscape somewhere? And so to have a camera that would augment that more than just exposure, tone, denoise, things like that,
Yeah.
that it just goes against the whole point of what you're doing. And I don't have a problem with using generative AI for making small fixes after the fact, but I want to be the person who is deciding what my camera is capturing, not I'm pointing my camera at something and I hope that the camera can fill in some parts that I don't see, right? Like
You hope the AI can fill in some parts.
exactly, yeah. If the AI is in the camera, like I have then abdicated my choice, my control to this other thing.
Right.
And the whole point is I'm out there because I want to take the picture. If I take a bad picture, then I need to try again. I need to go at a different time. I need to just get better at my craft. But if I take a bad picture, but the AI says, you know what, we can just replace the sky, well, then that's not my picture anymore. And so why am I even doing it?
You remember this feature that I believe it was Google who introduced this with the Pixel 9, where you could take a photo of a group and then someone takes a photo of you next to the group and it merges them to have everyone in the group. And that's kind of a clever, it's generative AI, but it's clever enough because you're admitting we were all here, but we didn't have a stranger who could take the photo.
Yeah.
And I find that a kind of interesting way, even if it's artificial, it's still used more as a, here is this remembrance of this group being together, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's also more casual. Like, again, let's go back to the intent. Like, I could not get a picture of, let's say you and I are together and we want to get a selfie together, but you say to yourself, I've never taken a selfie in my life and I don't intend to start now. And I really hate that whole look of like two people standing, but like someone's arm is occupying a third of the frame. And so maybe we use that feature in order to make it look like someone had taken a picture of the both of us. Like, it's not that we're going to frame this picture. It's just that, look, here we were, and we were actually together.
Which would be a rare event.
It would be a very rare event. When we eventually do get together in person, we will definitely have to take a picture just to prove it.
Another article I found interesting, and I had no idea that DNG wasn't like a standard. So Petapixel has an article saying that after 20 years of effort, DNG is now the official raw image standard. Now, official by who? Official in all of photography? Because we know that different camera manufacturers have had different types of RAW, and this makes it very difficult for raw image processors because they have to adapt every time there's a new camera because each camera has their own minor definitions. So is this actually something that all the camera manufacturers have agreed on?
I can't honestly tell. I mean, I need to go back and see, like who is saying that it is official?
It's the International Organization for Standardization, the ISO, that has now made DNG an official standard. And,
okay, that makes a lot more sense.
But will all the camera operators adopt this? It's not obvious, but by making someone an international standard, you're shaking your head no and pouting, by making something an international standard, that has the momentum to push people in that direction, right?
One would think. However, DNG has been available for a long time. Many companies use it. It's, I think, as universal as they can make it, and yet every camera manufacturer except for I think Leica
uses DNG. Yeah,
Leica uses DNG. And there's one other I can't remember right now. I think Hasselblad uses DNG, but Canon, Fuji, Nikon, Sony, they all have their proprietary ones, and I don't see them giving up on that. I don't know why, because it's ridiculous. I mean, we complain about this every time a new camera comes out. You're like, hey, I want to edit my RAW files. Well, if you just bought that camera and the support's not out there yet, you can't. It's ridiculous. So I don't know enough about the spec to say, like, does this DNG as a standard now, does this give the companies everything that they need in their file format? And I would think that it would, but they retool it for every single camera, and I don't exactly understand why, and I doubt that they would just give that up.
So the article says camera makers that have resisted including DNG in their cameras, claiming that Adobe owned DNG, or that there wasn't an easy way to implement DNG, or that the format wasn't documented, no longer have any excuses. It goes on to say the responsibility shifts. Camera manufacturers no longer have a valid reason to avoid supporting DNG. And this is really important if this is going to change, if photographers are going to require that people change this. Because if you're a professional photographer and you get the new camera and you go on a shoot and your Lightroom or whatever doesn't support it, you're losing a lot of time for something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm surprised it took this long. However, I'm old enough to remember when PDF was introduced. Not only was it an Adobe made format, you had to pay for the distiller to create a PDF, and you had to pay for the reader to view a PDF. It wasn't free, and it wasn't for a couple of years that Adobe made the reader free, and the distiller you had to pay for. And then they eventually realized that this wasn't going to take off unless they open sourced it, and then it started being used widely. And in fact, I believe with Mac OS X when it came out, one of the things that Apple said was that the display of images on the screen is essentially a PDF. It's using that format.
Yeah. I think display PostScript, which is like a component of what became PDF. Yeah.
So crazy. Only 20 years and DNG is going to work. Finally.
Yeah. And I'm not holding my breath that suddenly any of the big camera manufacturers will turn it around, unless, I don't know. Well, the terrible cynical part of me says, oh, well, if this means that they can lay off 30 people engineers, like maybe, but I don't know. They're so entrenched and they've resisted it for so long. I can't imagine them just saying, oh, well, you know what? Let's just go ahead and adopt this now.
Well, the best-selling camera in the world supports DNG.
And that would be the
whatchamacallit? The thing in your pocket there.
My keys?
Yeah.
Exactly.
The slab in your pocket. By the way, we're recording this on March 31st. Tomorrow, Apple is 50 years old.
50 years old? Since you brought that up, I'm going to throw in a little plug. I wrote an article for CNET about like the most consequential products that Apple had released in the last 50 years. So we'll put a link in the show notes. It turned out to be a surprisingly nostalgic trip down memory lane. And, I mean, not to get too in the weeds about how these things are made, I made a big list, a giant list of Apple products, and just had to like hack off entire categories just to make something that wasn't, I mean, my article ended up being like 3,000 words long just because there's just so much that they've done. But it was actually a lot of fun to go back and find all these reviews and think about all the things that I had used. And 50 years is a long time, and Apple's done a lot. So anyway, link will be in the show notes for that.
And for the two of us, it's made our careers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you, Apple. All right.
Thank you, Apple.
This is a topic I found extremely interesting for a lot of reasons. Again, Petapixel, restoring, in quotes, old photos with AI is a fundamentally broken concept. And this is so right in so many ways. And I remember a few years ago, people started colorizing photos. Remember the photo of Abraham Lincoln that was colorized and how everyone was shocked by it?
Yes.
It was because it was doing things differently. So the writer of this article, Jaron Schneider, he says that when he spent a semester abroad in Florence, he studied, he had a chemistry of art class where he was looking at how works of art are displayed. I remember when I visited Florence in the 80s, I think 85, I think it was just then that Botticelli's Birth of Venus had been restored. And there was all this controversy about these bright colors, because this is the colors he used. You know those Roman statues you see that are all white? They weren't
Oh
white
yeah.
back in the day. They had bright colors too, and they've all been faded over time. We have this idea of the past being the way we see it, and changing that is very difficult. So Abraham Lincoln in color shocked people because we see him as black and white. It's the semiotics of a black and white image that suggests history. Even though today we just talked about a monochrome camera and people are using black and white, but the history of images has its own looks. Now, in this article, they're showing a couple of images. He was using Restore AI, which is software by ON1. And in the article, he notes that the images are all public domain and were altered using this software. The first image at the top is a couple of people in the back of I don't know, one of these old cars that had doors like a wagon with wood frames about it.
Kind of like an early camper van.
Yeah, kind of. And what's interesting is it's a grainy photo. You can't see the faces of the people, and the restoration shows their faces. And you don't know whose faces they are. It's like, maybe this is your mother and father, and these people look nothing like your mother and father, right? So it's totally pointless. The one that I found most interesting, you scroll down a little bit, is a photo of someone, I want to say he looks Italian from the 1950s. It's a black and white photo with sepia tones from age, not intentional sepia tones. He's got his hair slicked back. He's got a wide lapelled shirt over a jacket. The restored version has him in color. The author of the article questions about why it chose a blue jacket, entirely valid choice. But it's not just restoring him, it's taking his face and altering it the same way DLSS 5 that we were talking about before is doing this in games. And the problem with this is, first of all, who do you think you are to change a face in a photo with restoration? Second of all, the age of the photo, the semiotics of that black and white photo, and particularly the dress, the clothes he's wearing and the hair and everything, suggest a specific time. And you pull it out of that time with these sharp images and bright colors, and his face looks like plastic, actually, the way it's lit. It's a very bad restoration of anything. And below that, you have another photo. So here's a group of people, looks like they're kind of on the beach. So the women are in beach chairs and the men have, a couple of the men have hats. And you're seeing something that's, I'd say it's from the 1930s, right? And then you see a new photo, and it could be almost any time. Let's say the 1950s, right? Because there's a guy in a bow tie, and it looks like that. But it's the same thing. The faces are not the original faces. They are whitewashed faces in a way. They are faces that are meant to look like what we think the faces should look like. I mean, you look at any comparison between the two, and they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. You can see enough of this idealization around the faces that makes it totally false. And so after they originally published the story, ON1 emailed to apologize, saying the team had inadvertently sent examples in the press kit that weren't meant to be there. Same thing happened with some game where people found AI images like on the walls of things, and these were placeholder images that weren't meant to be in the final release. And there's always an excuse, isn't there, when there's something AI accidentally, right? But I think the point about this is we're treading in dangerous water when we start doing things like this, when we start doing more than just denoising and perhaps refining the grain, and you remove the folds in an image. We're starting to change things in a way that is just unnatural.
I would say, I don't know, these examples really run the gamut because, for example, the one of the camper van, the thing that stands out to me is that the license plate is just very obviously AI generated, even though it's the same numbers and letters.
Yeah.
Like they don't have depth; they're a little off. Like the proportions are all wrong.
Yep.
So like that really stands out. The one of the single person really is awful because it's added more contour and detail to his face. I mean, honestly, it looks like a painting. It doesn't look like a restored photo. And so, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some justification for that. No, there's not. I'm being too
There's none,
generous.
none. Look at his lips in both of the photos. The difference in the
Yeah.
lips has gone from very thin lips to this idealized lips. That it's just,
a little
it's
bit more.
insulting that someone would think of doing this.
Yeah.
The group photo is the least bad, but you see the same kind of things as many of the faces are. I want to say they're made a little bit more attractive.
Well,
in some ways,
I think it's done a pretty good job on almost all the faces there. The thing that I run against with this one is that, it's too good. It looks like it has been shot yesterday. And I mean, I don't think these people looked that good even on the day. Everything's just a little bit too clean, a little bit too crisp. The highlights on their foreheads are a little bit too, I don't know, too perfect. And so I don't mind the picture by itself, but if you just shown me that, if you just showed me the restoration, I would still look at it and go, there's something not quite right here. And maybe it's because of how they're dressed, and you're supposed to see this as an older photo, even though the restoration doesn't look like it. So I think what it's doing is it's doing the job of make this photo look modern, right?
Make it look new, yeah.
Yeah, and what it needs to be doing, it needs to find a middle ground. You need to preserve what the original photo was and clean it up in other ways. I mean, you could absolutely clean up the grain and the noise. And actually, I mean, I've seen some examples of tools like this where they will repair old photos, and that, if there's a crease or a tear, water damage, things like that. And AI can do a really good job on those when it's not trying to recreate everything. This is trying to recreate everything. And I think that's where the problem is.
Yeah. Instead of fixing things that are wrong, it's trying to fix everything.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And that's a real problem.
Yep.
Okay. Do we have snapshots this week?
I have a snapshot. Do you have a snapshot?
I have a snapshot too. So why don't you go first?
My snapshot is going to be super self-serving. I released a new edition of my Take Control of iPhone Photography book, which I am very happy about because, A, it was a lot of work. Apple, as you know, totally revamped the camera app, at least the way it looks, the way some of the things work. I added new sections to it. It's a big update, and it took me a lot longer than I thought it would take. So go to takecontrolbooks.com and buy my update, or if you already own the book. So this is a 2.0. You can log in and see what the update pricing is, or if you get it for free if you've bought it recently. I can't remember exactly how that works. But yes, go buy my book and then tell me what you think of it. Kirk, what do you have?
David Pogue released a book called Apple, the First 50 Years. And what he did is he interviewed almost everyone still alive who's worked at Apple over the years. And I say almost because he didn't interview Tim Cook, and a couple other people wouldn't talk to him, but he interviewed everyone. This is a very large book, and it covers pretty much everything. And the book is written in an interesting way, very short sections about each product. And every 2-page spread has at least one photo or sidebar or something. So it's a leaf through it. It's not a read a narrative book. Wonderful book, very large. I haven't seen the book actually. He sent me a PDF to review it. But if you want to know everything about those products that Apple made that you talked about earlier in your 3,000-word article, this is Apple, the First 50 Years by David Pogue. And tomorrow we will celebrate April Fool's Day, which is the 50th anniversary of Apple.
Which I always think is just hilarious. I love it. That is so Apple. But yeah.
Yep. All right. Until next time, take care.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast app.